Well, well. Didn't think anyone was left. You must be pretty tough. Huh.
Who the fuck are you?
Oh, you're not local. Even better.
Karl Heisenberg is one of the most dangerous and interesting threats that Ethan Winters will encounter during the events of the game Resident Evil 8 Village. A true engineering mastermind, Heisenberg is the only member of Mother Miranda's inner circle who sees through her deceptions to his greater purpose in her ranks. The last known member of one of the region's oldest and most prominent bloodlines, Heisenberg resents the woman who deemed him as a failed experiment, and has vowed to use his formidable intellect and abilities to get his revenge.
You and me, Ethan. Together, we can go save Rose, and we can use her to grind Miranda into paste.
My daughter is not a weapon. Fuck you!
The story of Karl Heisenberg as we know it begins with his ancestry in a lonely and isolated region somewhere in Eastern Europe. From as far back as recounts of the area go, the land was ruled over by 4 noble houses who'd come together to create a political alliance to shore up their power and better control the vast area of the region. For decades, if not centuries, houses Moreau, Dimitrescu, Beneviento, and of course Heisenberg would serve as the most dominant forces that the location had to offer, their alliance prospering with the village that they helped found. However, unfortunately for these great houses, this dynamic would all change in the early 20th century, with the onset of a virus known as the Spanish flu. In the year 1919, this virus would strike hard at the region, killing dozens of the townsfolk and leaving those remaining fearful for their lives. It would be during this time that a young peasant woman from the village named Miranda would lose her daughter to the disease, and in her grief would find salvation through a deity that she referred to as the Black God. With tidings of this entity, she would return to the suffering village, curing their ailments with mold from her god and establishing herself as a new central pillar of the community. She would become known as the Black God's Prophet, and in time would fold the entire region, including the 4 great houses, into her flock. And it would be into this climate that a young Karl Heisenberg would be born.
Wings. As the midnight moon rises on black wings, we await the light at the end. In life and in death, glory to Mother Miranda.
Hey, remember me?
Into the noble house of Heisenberg, Karl would be born. And while we don't exactly have many details about his early life, we do know that he was one of many children from the village to be kidnapped by Mother Miranda and used in her experiments. Inside of Karl, Miranda would place a creature which she called a cadeau, a parasitic nematode which she used to test a person's ability to bond with her black god, the Megamycete. Heisenberg would prove a remarkable subject for Miranda's research, being one of the, if not the, most successful candidates that she would ever test. The cadeau would give the young boy electric organs, similar to an electric ray, allowing him to pass and control electricity throughout his entire body, and use that current to control magnetic fields. This adaptation made Heisenberg an exceedingly impressive force to be reckoned with. But despite this, he was still an unfit vessel for Miranda's needs. However, due to his lineage and newly found power, he was a strong ally to have, and so Miranda would place him into her council, keeping him close should she ever have need of his abilities. The young Heisenberg, on the other hand, resented the position. Miranda had taken him from his home, forced him to undergo strange medical procedures that could have very easily resulted in his death, keeping him at her beck and call, and after all that, expected him to call her mother, to be her son in an adopted family of freaks that she herself had deemed as failed experiments. Heisenberg hated Miranda for what she'd done to him. She'd made him less than human, a slave to her wishes, a pawn on a chessboard. He wanted revenge, wanted to take back his dignity from the woman who'd stolen it. And so, in the depths of the factory that he'd inherited from his lost family, he got to work on creating his revolution.
She took us to be her children. She locked us away in the village. Decades of being forced to serve her. Can you even understand that humiliation?
Heisenberg desperately wanted to kill the woman who'd taken his life from him, but knew that an attack on his part would be little more than a death sentence. Not only was Miranda incredibly powerful herself, but he would have to contend with the other four lords, as well as an army of lichen beasts under her control. And so he bided his time, playing along with Miranda's demands while trying to think of a way to even the seemingly insurmountable odds. He needed an army of his own, one that was powerful enough to rival Miranda's lichen hordes. And where better to get the soldiers from than the piles of corpses that Miranda had left in her wake? Heisenberg would begin robbing the graves of the village deceased in an attempt to conscript their bodies to his cause. Through trial and error, he would create truly deranged monstrosities, beings of metal and flesh, animated through electrodes fed to them by attached pieces of headgear. For years, Heisenberg would tinker with these macabre soldiers, preparing for the day when his forces could match Miranda's. However, before that day would arrive, his adoptive mother would find the vessel that she'd been searching for all this time in a child named Rosemary Winters. Through meetings with Miranda and her council, Heisenberg would learn of the latent power within this exceptional child. And while Miranda fixated on using that power to bring back her lost daughter, Heisenberg saw it as a way to finally get his revenge for the indignities that he'd suffered.
I don't give a damn about your personal issues. I just want to fix my daughter.
So do I. Do you have any idea how powerful that kid is? Even Miranda's scared of her.
Miranda would kidnap the young girl and bring her back to the village, crystallizing and breaking her into 4 pieces to give to the 4 lords for safekeeping, while a ritual could be prepared. Heisenberg played along with his mother's request, taking a piece of the child before withdrawing to his factory, making his own plans for Rose. However, once the girl's father entered the picture, things would get much more interesting for the genius engineer. Heisenberg would keep tabs on Ethan as he made his way through the region, capturing him early in his adventure and bringing him before Miranda's council to decide his fate. Ethan would eventually escape this captivity, and as he survived more and more hardships at the hands of the other members of the 4 lords, Heisenberg began to see him as a potential ally to aid in his fight against the wickedness of Miranda. Heisenberg is one of the most interesting characters that Ethan will encounter during his trials, a macabre mastermind with goals similar to Ethan's own, but with plans that disregard any sense of morality to achieve them. Heisenberg lived a rough life, kidnapped from a very young age and forced into the service of his captor, working within her system and plotting a revolution that he would never get to enact. A victim of obsession, a victim of self-absorption, and a truly dangerous man.
can't be the end for me!